There is a version of you in a parallel timeline who made one different decision 14 years ago. Same job, same salary, same rent, same starting point. The only difference between the two of you is small enough to seem meaningless. 14 years ago, he stopped buying one coffee a day. Today, that single decision is worth $61,000 more than yours. Now, before you go cancel your coffee order, I need to tell you something that the entire personal finance industry has built a business on hiding from you. That number is real, and it is also one of the most quietly misleading statistics in modern personal finance. Because here is the part nobody tells you in the thumbnail. That same man, the one who gave up coffee for 14 years, the one who did everything the advice told him to do, is still broke. Today, we're going to find out why an idea that is mathematically true can still be financially useless, and who actually benefits from you believing it. To understand why this idea took over an entire generation of financial advice, you have to go back to where it started. In 2004, a financial author named David Bach published a book that introduced a phrase that would outlive almost every other piece of money advice written in the 2000s. He called it the Latte Factor. The argument was simple, and that simplicity is exactly why it spread so fast. He said most people believe they can't get ahead financially because they don't earn enough. But the real reason, he argued, is smaller and far more fixable than people think. It's not your salary. It's the $5 a day you don't notice leaving your hand. Multiply that, he said, across a lifetime of investing instead of spending, and an ordinary person earning an ordinary salary could retire with hundreds of thousands of dollars they never thought they'd have. It was an attractive idea for a reason. It didn't ask you to earn more. It didn't ask you to take on more risk. It asked you to give up something small and feel virtuous about it. Financial media loved it. It was simple enough to fit in a headline, and it made for an easy moral. Your habits, not your circumstances, are the reason you're not rich. It became one of the most repeated ideas in personal finance content for the next 2 decades. Coffee shaming, avocado toast shaming, subscription shaming. An entire industry quietly built itself around a single, comforting premise. Your spending habits, not the system around you, are the reason you're not rich. Let's actually test that premise, properly, with the real math. Let's start with the number from the cold open and build it from scratch, step by step, so you can see exactly where it comes from, and exactly where it can fall apart. $5 a day spent on coffee adds up to roughly $150 a month. Now imagine that same $150 every month going into an index fund instead, a fund that tracks the broader stock market, averaging roughly 8% in annual returns over the long run. After 10 years of doing this, consistently, without missing a month, roughly $27,000. After 20 years, roughly $88,000. After 30 years, just over $220,000. This is not a trick. This is not exaggerated. This is simply what happens when a small amount of money is invested consistently over a long period of time and allowed to compound. So, on the surface, the entire premise checks out. The man who skipped the coffee really should be over $200,000 ahead. So why, in our opening scene, is he still broke? The answer is not that the math is wrong. The answer is that the math was only ever describing one tiny slice of a much bigger financial picture. And the advice industry has spent 20 years letting that slice stand in for the whole picture. Every version of this calculation depends on 3 assumptions that are almost never said out loud. The first assumption is that the saved money is actually invested, not saved in a drawer, not left sitting in a checking account earning nothing. actually, consistently put into the market, month after month, year after year. In practice, this is where most people's version of the latte factor quietly falls apart. Behavioral finance research has shown, again and again, that money saved through small cuts rarely gets redirected into investing. It tends to simply get spent somewhere else. The habit of not spending and the habit of investing are two completely different skills. The latte factor assumes they're the same one. The second assumption is that the market behaves smoothly for 30 straight years and that the investor never panics. Markets do not move in a straight line. There will be a 2008. There will be a 2020. There will be years where that $200,000 projection temporarily looks like $90,000, and the emotional pressure to sell, to lock in the loss before it gets worse, is enormous. The math assumes perfect, emotionless discipline through every single one of those years. Real human behavior, historically, does not look like that. And the third assumption, the one that matters most, is that small daily expenses are actually the reason most people struggle financially in the first place. Let's put that assumption next to the actual numbers. In most major cities today, a single month of rent costs more than 10 years of daily coffee combined. Wages, adjusted for inflation, have grown only modestly over the last several decades, while housing costs in major cities have grown dramatically faster than income over that same period. So when an entire industry tells a struggling person that the reason they're not getting ahead is the $5 coffee in their hand, it is not incorrect about the math. It is incorrect about where the actual weight of the problem sits. It is a small, comfortable villain, offered up in place of a much larger and much less comfortable one. It's worth asking a slightly uncomfortable question here. Why did this idea spread so widely if it only tells part of the story? Partly, it's because it's genuinely useful. The underlying lesson about compounding is real and worth knowing. But partly, it spread because it is a very convenient message for institutions that don't want attention drawn to the larger structural costs in people's lives. It is much easier, and much less controversial, to tell an audience to change their own small habits than it is to talk about wage stagnation, housing costs, or healthcare pricing. This isn't a conspiracy. It's simpler than that. Advice that blames the individual is comfortable to give and comfortable to receive. Advice that points at the system is harder to sell and harder to act on alone. So the coffee became the story. Because the coffee was the part anyone could actually do something about, even if it was never the biggest part of the problem. So is the $61,000 number from the start of this video a lie? No, the math behind it is completely real. Compounding is real. Consistent investing genuinely does turn small amounts of money into large ones over decades. But the coffee itself was never actually the lesson hiding inside that number. The man in our opening story didn't end up $61,000 ahead because he specifically gave up coffee. He ended up ahead because he was the only person in the story who took any small, repeatable amount of money and turned it into an unbroken habit for 14 straight years. It could have been the coffee. It could have been a subscription he forgot to cancel. It could have been $10 from anywhere. The source never mattered. What mattered is that he didn't stop. Not during a bad month, not during a market crash, not when it felt pointless. That is the actual mechanism behind every version of this story that has ever worked. Not deprivation, but consistency that survives boredom, survives market downturns, and survives the temptation to quit. The latte factor isn't wrong. It's just aimed at the wrong target. The coffee was never the enemy. Stopping, at any point, for any reason, is the only thing that actually breaks the math. So drink the coffee. The $5 was never the thing standing between you and financial security. The 30 years where most people never start investing anything at all. That's the actual cost, not the coffee. The empty jar. Fix the habit, not the coffee. And the next time someone tells you that your $5 drink is the reason you're not rich, ask them what they're not telling you about the other 95% of your budget.